I see it. Oh well, okay. I am going to be talking about monsters and Tasha's, because like everybody seems to be talking about Tasha's Cauldron of everything. It's the hot topic. Apparently, people can't get enough of it. So I thought I would actually be sort of, I don't know, slightly original and talk about Tasha's, but actually break down the mechanics and actually explain what I think of these mechanics they have provided for parlaying with monsters, rather than just sort of say, okay, this is what I think very generally. So yeah, so I'm going to do my sound check and so forth. You will find the start time for this video down in the description. You will let me know if the image or the sound is problematic, and if there's an opportunity to fix it, then I'll try to fix it now while I still can. Now, for those of you who are unaware of how things work with my YouTube channel, this is a live stream, so I put the start time down in the description. When YouTube actually publishes the live stream as a high definition version, that takes at least a day usually. The live stream will stay visible and public until I produce an edited version of the live stream, and then I will unlist the live stream, and you'll only get, unfortunately, the edited version. And the edited version does not include the Q&A or questions and answers that I do at the end of the live streams, for those of you who are wondering. Thank you, Fred, for letting me know that the sound in the video is working. That's always really helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, now the other thing I'd like to say is, if you have made sure to subscribe, hit the bell button and turned on notifications, you should be able to find the live stream later on if you want to get access to it. That's one of the perks of making sure you do those things. If you're a patron, I always give you access to live streams on the Patreon page, and I also give you the notes for my videos, so you can actually see what I've actually been talking about and read about it, rather than, I guess, listen to it if you don't want to listen to me. That's fine. Thank you, John. It's good to know the sound is working. Now, I was really excited about this particular section of the book, hence the reason why I want to talk about parlaying with monsters and what they have provided you in Tasha's Cauldron of everything. Some of it is good, some of it is bad. The other thing is, if you haven't been part of my live streams before, what you'll find is I present everything first and I use slides. Just makes it easier for me, okay? And then once I've done that, I then go back to the webcam and we discuss it. I will answer questions. You can give your own feedback if you have something in particular you want to say. All of that is the sort of thing that I'm looking for at the end of the live stream. I have a lot of notes here. It's actually a very small section in the book, but I have at least 4 and a bit pages. So I would suspect that's about 22, 23, maybe 25 minutes to actually go through all that material. So I have a lot of slides. And I will say now, I'm going to show you stuff directly from the book. So if you were wondering if that was going to happen, yeah, that's going to happen, because that's what I do. It works for me. I don't know why people get so upset about it. Frankly, I always thought it made more sense. I would like to actually see what's actually in the book. So grab a sandwich or some food, drink, get comfortable, make sure you are ready for it, and we'll get started into this, okay? Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, specifically Dungeons and Dragons 5e and family values. No, not really. I had no intention of talking about family values, particularly not a big spider. No, the topic for today is parlaying with monsters in Tasha's Cauldron of everything. It's the hot topic. It's what so many people were looking for and hoping to get some really good stuff out of. So do we get that? So let's go directly to the text in the book, because I think that's going to be really helpful to get us started. First off, the section on parlaying with monsters is not very clear. It only offers you general information you could probably figure out yourself, or on a specific type of monster, or in some cases more likely just a specific monster rather than even a monster type. Now that doesn't sound too great, does it? Okay, here's the other thing you may have noticed, and it's actually in the book. It states you can bribe or talk to a monster rather than fight them. Okay, well, I kind of figured out that myself. It also refers you to the social interaction rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 244 to 246. Okay, good. All right, so we're getting referred to a different book where, frankly, I thought the Parleying with Monsters thing would probably be there. Well, actually, it kind of already is, believe it or not. Basically, if you go to the Dungeon Master's Guide, on those pages I just stated, it gives you the social interaction rules. And what it does is it gets the Dungeon Master to decide if the monster is friendly, indifferent, or hostile. And then it offers a series of tables. A table for the monster's reaction to whatever the charisma check you actually perform. And it gives you a difficulty class or DC. Now, these charisma checks aren't necessarily spelled out. They could be an intimidation, it could be something like a persuasion, or even a deception. So any of those could sort of play into the charisma check. Okay, so I've got that. What's next? I've been told to go to another book and that I can just talk or they could bribe them. Okay, moving on. This is where we get a little bit better. The monster research skill table is a good idea. And I actually did something like this in an older video called Monster Knowledge Checks. But here we actually get something official and definitive. And you might have noticed though that it gives you the type of monster and the skill or knowledge skill associated with it. But it doesn't really seem to give you anything in terms of DC. So what are we missing? Okay, so what it does is it gives you a difficulty class. It states that the skill check for that difficulty class is 10 plus the creature's challenge rating. Okay, now I can see some problems. I talked about this sort of thing before where you add 10 plus the challenge rating of a monster for a knowledge check of any kind. Because what do you get? Usually you will get, on a very, very low challenge rating monster, a 10. Because 10 plus a fraction is going to be 10. And then for really high level monsters, you're going to get anything that's probably above 30. And yet our skill check range is usually between 5 and 30. And anything that's like a 5 or a 10 is usually a waste of your time. That's in my opinion. So you tend to get stupidly low DCs or impossibly high DCs to be successful on a knowledge check to figure out or do research on the monster. So what are we actually researching? I'll get there. But what I want to do is just talk briefly about this little formula and equation. It's something that Wizards of the Coast like to do. I can totally understand why they try to do it, but I think it's coming from a perspective that Dungeons and Dragons is mathematics, and Dungeons and Dragons is not really mathematics. It's left up to the Dungeon Master, if you have a look, to determine how the system will work, essentially, or to fix the system, or more likely, most of you are going to homebrew the system and change the DC system or the difficulty class system, but it doesn't actually state that in the book. Instead, they give you a formula. I would like to point out that this formula for figuring out how to do monster research is based on a system which the designers don't use in their pre-made adventures, they don't use in their own personal games, and is notoriously inaccurate challenge rating. So you're going to base something on an existing system that doesn't really work very well. I don't really understand the thinking behind this. But it's not all bad. We will get to some of the gooder stuff. Don't you worry. Okay, so monster challenge rating has very little to do with how hard it is to know their motives. If you have a look at how challenge rating is structured, it's about combat effectiveness, how difficult they are to fight, not how difficult it is to know their deep, dark secrets, if they have any deep, dark secrets, or to do sort of lore knowledge stuff. And frankly, Wizards of the Coast know this, so I don't know why they have included that in the book. It's an odd one for me. The Monster Desire tables are all right. When I looked at those, they are quite short, and I would say they are a bit too short. They can't hope to cover the wide range of monsters in any given type, because not every undead creature has the same motive or desires, even within the same type of creature. It's not like all undead will want the same things. That just doesn't work that way. Personally, I think what is going to be more useful to you is don't roll randomly on the Monster Desire tables. When you go to a table and decide to use them, don't roll randomly, but instead be very selective and pick out the ones that make sense for a particular monster you are dealing with. If they don't make sense, don't use any of them. Many of the Monster Desires are related to, I would say, intelligent creatures or monsters rather than the not so bright or the dumb monsters, and certainly some of them are very specific that would only really be keyed into a particular type of monster given your game. So let's have a look at these monster tables and break them down and see what we get, because I know a lot of you want to actually see what we're going to get in the book, right? So the first one, aberrations. So what are the desires that are available? What would be something that we would be interested in if we were an aberration? The brain or the organs of a rare creature. I can live with that. Flattery or flattery and something else. I can't even pronounce it right now. I'm tired. Secrets or lore it doesn't already know. Okay, I can live with that. Yep. Accept a strange... Oh, okay, so that means the player's character has to accept a strange or an organic graft onto their body, which probably, if they're doing that, is going to have some way of controlling them or changing them in some rather diabolical way. So I think with this table, it's going to be great for the Beholders, the Elder Brain, and the Mind Flayers. Not really applicable to a Gibbering Mouther or an Otiog, which is basically the garbage monster for Dungeons and Dragons. What about the beasts? What have we got for beasts? Well, desires, fresh meat. Okay, I kind of figured that one out. A soothing melody, brightly coloured beads, cloth, feathers or string. An old stuffed animal or other soft trinkets. I guess trinkets or toys, something like that. Well, what is that going to be applied to? Maybe it's going to apply to some cats, some birds, some fish. Maybe some of the medium to small carnivores will be interested in the meat. I don't know they'll necessarily be interested in the other things there. Not really generalizable to all the beasts. It's not likely to work with a dinosaur. I don't think I would try this with a dinosaur. You could throw a dinosaur meat, yes, but I think that the meat that you throw them is not going to be as enticing as the meat in your body that will provide them with far more nourishment. Okay, what about celestials? What do we have there? A tale of heroic figure. Okay, cool. An oath to do 3 charitable deeds before dawn. All right. The crown of a defeated tyrant, a holy relic or a treasure, some sort of treasured family heirloom. Okay, so who would that apply to? I think that's a reasonable motive or motives for something like a diva, a planeteer, solar, angel. Not really suitable for an unaligned or an evil celestial or monster. I don't think they're really going to care about those sorts of things. So, yeah, it's not going to be completely generalizable, obviously. And I think, to be fair, it would be impossible to provide a table that covered all the bases in a monster type. Although there are some exceptions I discovered as I was looking through here. So the next table we need to look at is the constructs. What would a construct want? Oil to be applied to the construct's joints. Well, maybe if they're made of iron, I don't think that a clay golem or some of the other golems or constructs would care. So if they've got joints that are made of metal, maybe if they rust. a magic item with charges to be used as fuel. All right, provided they understand that can be done. So that suggests the construct needs to be pretty intelligent. A vessel infused with elemental power. Okay, I can see that being pretty useful for most elementals. Adamantian or mithril components. Right, okay, so what are they going to do with them? How are they going to apply them to themselves? That's an interesting problem there. Okay, I'm going to say all right. These are motives that are all right for an independent and intelligent construct, which, if you might have already guessed, is actually pretty rare. In fact, very rare. They don't really come up that often. These desires that are suggested aren't really going to supersede or override the creator's instructions, and they're way too specific. I think that they would be very difficult to use with many of the constructs that exist in the game currently. And then you know the reason why is a construct is usually pre-programmed. So therefore, trying to give something to a construct that's following a pre-programmed instruction from its creator means that parlaying or talking with them is probably not going to be quite so easy to do. So I'm going to give Wizards of the Coast the benefit of the doubt of trying really hard, given that you're dealing with a situation where talking is probably going to be not on the cards. Okay, what about dragons? Dragons are a big one, right? Golden gems, anything from a draconic rival's horde, okay, an antique, is it an antique passed down at least 3 generations? So antiques. All right, well, I can believe that. Flattery, artistic depiction of the dragon. Yep, I actually think this is pretty good. I think this is actually really helpful in almost every single case except for drakes. I would just like to point out that I think most of us have already figured out that giving a dragon gold, gems, and rare items is probably going to be something they want. We probably didn't need Wizards of the Coast to tell us that. It would have been nice to see something else, but there's nothing actually wrong with this table. It's actually mostly generalizable. Number 6, the elementals. What do we got for the elementals? This is a tough one, I feel. A gem worth at least 50 gold pieces, really? It has to be worth at least 50 gold pieces. Do elementals even know how much a gem is worth? Which the creature will then eat. So it's going to eat gems. All right. An exceedingly pure sample of a favored element. Or, okay, all right. Cool. A way to return the elemental to their home plane. That actually is a pretty good one. Performing a dance from the elemental's home plane. Okay. Feel like this is a little odd one, but let's give it to them. How does this apply to what we have in terms of monsters in our game? Yes, I spent many hours going through every single one trying to see if these desires were applicable to a range of different monsters. So I think this is a nice idea for the elemental. It's pretty good for general elementals like your fire, water, air, earth elementals, those challenge rating 5 creatures that we have in the Dungeon Master's, the Monster Manual. Mephits, I think Mephits would probably go for a lot of this. I think you could probably use this. But then most people don't really worry about a Mephit because Mephits aren't that powerful unless, of course, you modify them. The other thing I would say is this is not going to be useful for a gargoyle. Gargoyles aren't going to care in the slightest about most of this. And if you're dealing with a really super powerful elemental being, I don't think they would really worry about any of that. If they need to go back to their home plane, chances are they left their home plane, came to your plane to wreak havoc and to have their own way. So I don't think there's too much you can really do with a super powerful elemental being. But that doesn't mean you can't try it out. Okay, the next one, this gets a little bit interesting. It gets more, how can I say this? We are entering into the kinky range, for those of you who haven't figured it out. The Fae. Now, what do we got here? The memory of your first kiss. Okay, I like that. The colour of your eyes. An object of deep sentimental value to you. Okay. Reciting a sublime poem. Does it have to be a sublime poem? Can't you just recite any poem? I guess not all poems are equal. So who does this apply to? What monsters? I think this is focused on the dryad, satyrs, pixies, siren, maybe a siren, sprites. Nonsensical for a blink dog or hags. I don't think that blink dogs or hags would care in the slightest about any of that. So you don't want to apply that in that case. But there's quite a few that it would apply to. Next, fiends. What do they want? Your soul. I kind of figured that one. A desecrated holy object. Yep. Blood from a living or recently slain loved one. Well, that's pretty sick, but okay. Breaking a sacred promise in the fiend's presence. Oh, okay. So, delicious stuff. So, who is this focused on? I think the key motives for this are around intelligent devils. More around intelligent devils rather than unintelligent devils. Certainly it would apply to something like maybe a demon lord, which is good. And maybe the barbed devil would be a good example of where you could apply it. We often find ourselves, if you're running a pre-made adventure, with the barbed devil. It seems to be one of the favourites for Wizards of the Coast. If you're running your own campaign, you probably have all sorts of things. Where does it fall flat? Demons will not really care about most of these. Okay, demons in general, the lower level ones, wouldn't give two hoots. They're just there for death and destruction, and you trying to provide these things to them, they're going to take them anyway. Now, I would say dretches, mains, and lemurs, they're really not going to be interested. They're just not smart enough to know what they're getting. Okay, you're giving them something they just don't really know what to do with. So I wouldn't apply that in that case. Okay, number 9. Let's have a look at this. This is the giants. Okay, a dwarf admitting giant craft to be superior to dwarf craft. So a dwarf is admitting to a giant that their stuff is not as good as a... Oh, well, I think that works. I can see that. There is a rivalry between dwarves and giants. A strong working animal. Really? Or just a tasty working animal? Can't it be just a tasty working animal rather than a strong working animal? Multiple barrels of ale. I'll give them that. Treasure stolen from a rival giant. Well, heck, it could be any treasure, frankly. I don't think it has to be stolen from a rival giant. Giants are all good with money most of the time. So most giants would have these goals. I think this is actually pretty good for what you're getting. Except for, say, something like the hill giants. You just don't know what a hill giant's going to do. And ogres, hard to know. They're too stupid half the time to realise that you're giving them something that they couldn't just take themselves. You could give them something like this and they would probably still attack you anyway. So probably not quite so useful for an ogre. Maybe even a troll. I don't know that necessarily a troll is going to be interested in those sorts of things. They're just going to do what they want anyway. Okay, next chart. This is the 10th chart there is. Humanoids. Promising to find a lost item of great importance to their culture. Interesting. Challenging them to a type of friendly contest such as a dance, singing, or drinking. Okay, welcome the bards. Recovering something they have lost. Alright, they can kind of work for a lot of different creatures, provided they're reasonably intelligent. And most humanoids are pretty intelligent, so these kind of do work. Information on a foe's secrets or weaknesses. Okay, I'm going to give them a big thumbs up. Pretty good overall, but there should be more. I mean, you think about humanoids, there should be significantly more than just 4 there. Rather than just 4, we should have probably had more like 10. I can see there being multiple things you could have applied generally across the humanoids. But again, pretty good. Okay, table number 11 is monstrosities. This is where it gets interesting. I've been hanging out to talk about this one. Dislodging the stuck scraps of a creature's last meal. Okay, so you got your armor, somebody's armor stuck in your teeth, or maybe there's a thigh bone that you couldn't quite get loose, or yeah, okay, I'll leave it. Feels very sort of Dragonheart to me. The creature's favorite food. Cool. Is the creature's favorite food you? That's the question. Is it one of the player's characters? Yes, you probably can offer them that. Driving off the creature's rivals. Yeah, okay. Making movements that mimic the monster's mating dance. Oh, I like that one. I can see a lot of problems coming up, but it'll be entertaining. So what do I have to say about this? Generally useful with, I would say, potentially kinky options. That kind of made me laugh. That last one in particular really did. I couldn't help but sort of find that quite amusing. Now, it's not really relevant to a low wisdom or low intelligence monster, particularly if they're low wisdom and low intelligence. Something like a purple worm or a piercer is probably not going to be interested in any of those sorts of things. The creature's favourite food is pretty obvious, but is the creature's favourite food the player's character? That's the question. Now, I want to go back to the last one on the monstrosities because it's worth discussing. I want you to imagine that one of your players decides to do the mating dance, figures out what the mating dance of a particular monster is, and starts performing that. And if they are successful, the monster thinks it's making advances towards them and then moves in for that sexual encounter. Can you see the expression on your players' faces and the Dungeon Master as they have to deal with that? A bit of advice around having to deal with players who try to seduce a monster probably would be useful here because, one, it's a great opportunity for something that's quite amusing, and I'm all for amusing. But two, it could make a few people uncomfortable, and a little bit of advice around this sometimes can be helpful. You don't have to provide a manual though. Okay, table number 12, oozes. What do we got here? A vial of putrid liquids. Okay. Cloth bearing a noxious ogre. Ogre? No, odor. Not an ogre. But I think ogres are probably noxious. Bones or metal which the ooze promptly absorbs. Okay. A gallon of any effervescent fluid. Effervescent fluid? I've never even thought that oozes might be interested in frothy fluids. Maybe they are. I guess they're not snails. So now, how does this work in terms of our monsters? The ooze. They don't really care about what they eat. So you could throw anything at an ooze and they'll probably try to consume it, generally. I mean, not all oozes are exactly the same. But what I find interesting is that oozes prefer flesh, don't they? And that's apparently not on the menu. So I would have thought mentioning that you can throw a chunk of meat or a animal, alive or dead, maybe push one of your fellow mates into the creature and they'll be happy while you run away or attack it or whatever. So I think that one of the key motives for any ooze is going to be living fetal flesh because they tend to generally consume that sort of stuff to get their nutrients. And if you don't believe me, go and check out AJ Pickett and his YouTube channel, and he talks about oozes there, and I'm sure he will confirm that. Okay, the second to last table, this is table number 13. There's a lot of tables here. Plants, what are their desires? A pound of mulch, okay. Water from a spring infused with fey wild energy, all right. Clearing an invasive or a nasty vegetation from the creature's territory. So basically weeds, things that they don't like in the area. I get it. Destroying all axes and fire-making implements the party is carrying. All right. Okay, so how does this work with plants? duh. This is all pretty obvious if you ask me. The last one was a bit more creative. I feel like they get definite points for that. Maybe even the second to last one. It didn't really enlighten me. I didn't feel like it sort of did anything else. Does it apply to plants? Yeah, I think it probably does. So it does its job, okay? Even though I think it's pretty obvious. Okay, table 14. This is the last table. The undead. So what do the undead want? A vial of blood. Or maybe a vampire does. A personal memento from the creature's past. Right. Materials, tools, or the skills to sunproof a crumbling mausoleum. I feel like we'll go back to the vampire. Completing a task the creature was unable to finish in life. That sort of sounds like a ghost to me. So I would say this table could relate to a lich in some cases. I think a lich might be interested in a personal memento from the creature's past, but God knows what they would do with it. Materials, tools, or skills. Just that section would certainly relate to a lich. But I do feel a lot of it is talking about the vampire, and the last one feels like it's definitely talking about the ghost. Here's the problem. Not really useful for zombies and skeletons, but I'm sure you already figured that out, so in that case you probably won't use this chart for zombies and skeletons. There are other undead that I don't think would really care about these sorts of things because they can't do anything with these sorts of things, particularly the incorporeal creatures. They don't really care about the sort of stuff that we care about, so none of that's going to really work. Okay. The monster desire tables need a few more relevant examples. I have tried very hard to provide you with some examples and sort of some critique to help you, just in case you were unsure how to make that work. But it would have been nice, since the chart is mostly just blank space, if they had put down the desire and given us a couple of examples of creatures that might have that particular desire. I think that would have been really helpful for new dungeon masters, but even experienced dungeon masters. It's a nice idea. There's not really enough guidance here that's offered by the design team or Wizards of the Coast. Or in some cases you wind up with irrelevant mechanics that don't apply at all, or just suggestions that don't really apply at all. Not always the case, because there are some tables there that actually work pretty well, as I've just discussed. So if you found this video helpful and informative, that's fantastic. If you want more videos on Tasha's Cauldron of everything, you'll need to let me know. If you are interested in a knowledge check around monsters, I actually have a video already on monster knowledge checks and how to sort of make them work in your game, and you're welcome to go and check out that video. Otherwise, I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters I'm sure you will find useful. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing content like this, you can do that through Patreon down in the description. I also have an Amazon affiliate link down in the description. You can check out my merchandise shelf, or just watch my videos, that's fine too. Make sure to share, like and subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos, all those normal YouTube things. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, let's have a chat. Well, we have a small room today, so we won't need to worry about hashtag question, will we? I would imagine if I do a video on one of the subclasses that there'll be a lot more traffic. But that'll happen because I'm going to do some videos on that anyway. But I'll talk very briefly about that in a second, I think. So, if you have any questions, any feedback on what I've just shown you, all of this is in the book. I've taken most of this off D&D Beyond, so that you can sort of see what it is. Okay. Okay, but it's not a complete loss. It's just there's more work to be done than maybe you would want to do, and you probably were expecting to get a lot more, so you didn't have to do quite so much work. So I've already said hi to F. Hubber and John. What have you got here, Fred? I have always enjoyed when the players decide to negotiate rather than fight. Me too. I think the only thing I found a little bit frustrating and annoying is when a player says, I want to persuade the monster, or deceive the monster, or intimidate the monster, but they don't actually state what they're going to do. They just want to roll the dice. I think jumping straight to the dice rolling rather than giving me some sort of narrative to work with is kind of difficult. I'm sure other dungeon masters find the same thing. But I do enjoy that. It means, let's get real. If we're dealing with older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, you would often have to fall back on that sort of thing rather than enter combat, because unlike modern Dungeons and Dragons, combat was deadly. Right. Sometimes it turns out to be combat anyway, but the negotiations are always entertaining. Yes, absolutely. How's it going, Fleet Centurion? Nearly everything in Tasha's is either game-breaking or utterly useless. Yeah, I know you. I know your perspective is that is usually not super popular, which is fine, and usually incredibly blunt and honest. And yes, I would say that the vast majority of the stuff in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is definitely game-breaking. And people don't believe me, but I know they don't. The people who don't believe me because they want it to be game-breaking, and they certainly wouldn't want to admit to it. So I have decided, since my sense of humour is Kiwi, and I know nobody else is going to do it, next week we usually have a player video, and I'm going to do a player video. But you as Dungeon Masters are welcome to show up, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how to exploit the nuts and bolts of one of the subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And I thought, after talking with one of my friends, that where I would cover Path of the Beast and explain all the cool things you can do and how you can exploit it in the most appalling manner in your game. And I know there are dungeon masters turning over in their grave right now. But I'm going to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it. And then I'm also, at some point, going to release a video explaining how you might need to manage that situation, because there's so much in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that's going to sort of involve that. Now, in terms of utterly useless, I wouldn't say that it's utterly useless. I would say that the monster research table is actually really good. I think that's fine. I think the monster desire tables are too small. It's not enough, but they are generally all right. Particularly if you're not very creative and you haven't done very much research on those monsters, maybe that would really help. But you still got to have it close by to actually be able to utilize it, right? So you've either got to print it out or have it available in some way. So I don't think that's wrong. I just think that maybe a bit more, and maybe not relying on the challenge rating system in terms of the DC was probably a bad idea, considering challenge rating is notoriously problematic already, and none of the designers use it themselves. They just created it. It's like, what's going on there? What's going on there? The true measure of a mechanic is when the designers create it but never use it. It sort of suggests that maybe you shouldn't either. So yes, I can kind of understand your feelings around the DC system for making a monster research check. That would probably be pretty useless to you. Oh, hi Matt, how's it going? Matt Nerdy's here. Now, D&D Homebrew. Now, I would be very interested to know what KR King, Kevin, would have to say about this particular setup in terms of parlaying with monsters, since I've already sort of shown you a whole bunch of tables. When you reverse engineer monsters CR using the Dungeon Masters tables, it really works out the way it's listed in the books. Are you suggesting, Kevin, that maybe the CR system is not very helpful? You get a thumbs up for me. I know there are still some people who want to cling to it. I know it's considered a guide, but frankly, I've always found that challenge rating for combat, not really for knowledge checks, but for combat, really is only useful between level 1 and 4, and usually only for beginner players. And even then, it doesn't really take into consideration the vagaries of your table, and skill level. Skill level can help, and just dumb luck because you're rolling dice. What do you got here, Kevin? Constructs are made to not have desires. Yes, you're quite right there, Kevin. Part of the reason why I feel like the table on constructs is a problem. This is why I say with a construct, those 4 options there really would only relate to a highly intelligent, but particularly an independent construct who isn't pre-programmed and has had time to actually develop something, some personality and some wants, desires and needs. Otherwise, it's not going to really work. We are going to get the Dungeon Master's Guide out very shortly, since they referred to the Dungeon Master's Guide rather than actually providing anything in the book. So we might as well have a look at that page, right? Because probably nobody's ever looked at that section, or if they did, they skipped past it, because I frankly did. Matt, mating dance equals triple XP. Okay, so I'm going to give Matt 3 A's. So A+ for yes, you should absolutely, if the players are successful in the mating dance of a monster, give them triple the experience points, because it is just going to be the funniest thing under the sun, and I'm all for it. Just make sure you bone up. You bone up on your natural history, not your natural history, your natural biology and your animal behavior before you start playing your game. All right, Hubba, what do you got here? I might find the official rules in Tasha's useful, but I've done most of this before in advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I started playing in 1975. Yes, Fred, I think you're probably right. You probably have already done all of this. A lot of people have been saying that, look, what you've offered is something that we've already done. The only thing they have offered, frankly, that I think a lot of people wanted was, which knowledge check relates to a particular monster type. I think that's what a lot of people really wanted. And this gives you something to work with. I would be really interested. I would love to be a fly on the wall to see if Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford actually use this table themselves, because I kind of suspect they don't. But they put it in the book. All right. Vamp Kitty. Hello, Vamp Kitty. Another Kiwi here. Really like your stream about druids. Okay. I always wanted to play one, so it was massively helpful. Yeah, no, look, what I try to do from time to time, and I do get caught up in other things sometimes, is I try to put out videos that nobody else is putting out that you will find useful. The druid, the best druid cantrips video was very hard for me to do, frankly, because I think druids are very difficult to play. You're welcome. I'm hoping over time it will be useful to more people, because I think there needs to be a lot more guidance around how to play a druid, because they are so difficult to figure out. But it's there, and I'm glad you like it. That means, if you haven't figured it out, eventually I will do all the subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of everything. And I would like to say that the druids in Tasha's Cauldron to everything are pretty they're pretty impressive. Yeah, yeah, I would say they're definitely winners. Definitely winners in the min max and the power game as well. I think you're going to find a lot of people who really love them. Adventurers League, there's no way I'm ever going to Dungeon Master Adventurers League now. After seeing Tasha's Cauldron to everything, there's no way I could stomach it. It would just drive me nuts. I think I'm now relegated to staying away from conventions where Adventurers League would be run, and game stores. I don't think I'll be going back. Um, Actually, I know this sounds weird, but I've been considering looking at old school Renaissance OSR. I've been out in the garden, so I'm a bit tired, for those of you who haven't figured it out. I've been really considering looking at some of the rule systems that are based off the original rule systems, but have just been reorganized, reformatted, and maybe have something else added in to help people figure out how to use them and make them, in some cases, given options for modernizing them. And I think that may well wind up being something that happens more and more on my channel as a result of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But still doing Dungeons and Dragons 5e, or should I say Dungeons and Dragons 5.5 now. Okay, what do you got here? Oh, I love exploiting the stuff the players want by giving it to an NPC or a dozen NPCs. Be careful what you ask for, you might get it. Well, I'm hoping that if I show people how to exploit those subclasses, Dungeon Masters will figure out what's going to crop up in their game, and they'll figure out how to manage the situation, because we do not want you to pull your hair out. You need your hair where it is. My intention is to make the Dungeon Master's life easier, and I'm hoping that will certainly happen if I do those videos. Craze. How's it going, Craze? The Druid video was good for me too. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear there are 2 people. I mean, it didn't get a lot of traffic. Not a lot of people watched it. I kind of expected that. But it's good to hear from the people who are into Druids, who really liked that video. It's been, you've really had to wait a long time. It's got to be at least a year, almost a year since I started that particular series, and I finally finished it. Or have I finished it? Is there a class that I haven't covered in terms of cantrips? Or is there a class that is a spellcaster that I should have covered? The Artificer. Oh, gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm not even sure I can even fathom how to get my head around that one. Maybe. We'll see. Okay, what do you got here, Matt? The new monk subclass is... Yes, the new monk subclasses. I'm a fan of wizards, but I particularly like monks because I've been involved in the martial arts. I got myself to 3rd Dan, and then I got old. So 3rd Dan Black Bolt, and then I got too old to really do it. There's a point where you sort of have to accept that you are aging, and I accepted my aging. So, Matt, it's funny you should mention the monks subclasses, because, and I'm going to be going to the Dungeon Master's Guide in a minute. Literally, we're going to be talking about monsters. I'm going to say this. I was talking with one of my friends, Simon, and he was very excited about the monk. And usually Simon hates monks. He thinks they're awful. But I get the impression we are going to sit down and have a discussion about how to exploit the monks in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I've already sat down and talked about the Path of the Beast, so you're going to get that next week. Sweet. It might be a long video because there's a lot you can do. Vamp Kitty, what do you think of the Monster Hunter class? I know it's not truly part of D&D 5e. To be fair, I didn't really think too much of it. The Monster Hunter class or subclass, I don't really like it. I know players liked it who saw it and used it. And yes, I've had the Monster Hunter class in my game, or earlier versions of it, should I say. I don't really think too much of it. Frankly, it's not my cup of tea. It's a little bit too specific. What martial arts, Trent? Well, actually, Trent, it was... So my mentor and sensei, who's... I think he's now passed. He picked Goshin Kai, which is actually based off another style that was being taught in Japan many years ago, when you could only do your black belt in Japan. You couldn't do it in New Zealand. You had to go overseas to actually train to get your black belt. And so that particular school was shut down. So he figured, well, I can take on that name because they are no longer using it. And so that's how it happened. So it's very much a collective. Goshin Kai was open hand, and like many karate styles. But essentially the idea was we did everything. There was no just sparring. It wasn't really competitive, although we did have some competitive stuff. A lot of throwing, a lot of locks and holds, the whole thing. Everything that makes up martial arts. It wasn't all separated like a lot of people do nowadays. Okay, looking forward to the monk video with Simon. Yeah, I think that might be a little way off. I think the monk one is probably going to require Simon to percolate and me to percolate, but it'll happen. Yep. Okay, now let's talk about this page in the... I'm going to take my glasses off so I can actually read it. For those of you who are wondering. So apparently in the Dungeon Master's Guide, since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in the Parleying Monster section has referred us to page 244, 245 and 246. I think really it's 244 and 245 that are really applicable. And it says here, social interaction. And it says resolving interactions. And there's a section that says starting attitude, which is this friendly, indifferent, and hostile. So friendly creatures want to help the adventurers. Okay, I kind of figured that. Wishes for them, wishing for them to succeed. Okay, so in other words, it's pretty easy. I don't think it's going to be very hard to get a monster to talk to you if they are friendly. And I guess giving them anything isn't really going to change their view of you unless they are complete dicks and do something stupid and nasty to a friendly monster. It does talk about a successful charisma check might be required to convince a friendly creature to take a risk. So risking their life, I think that may be the only time you need to worry about it. It's not like you can improve from friendly to something else. And then we've got indifferent. So what is indifferent? An indifferent creature might help or hinder the party. So they're on the fence, depending on what the creature sees as the most beneficial. Okay, so this is the time in an indifferent monster where using a monster desires table would be quite useful, because there's a chance to sway them, right? A creature's difference doesn't necessarily make it standoffish or disinterested. And different creatures might be polite or genial, surly or irritable. Okay, any of that. A successful charisma check is necessary when an adventurer tries to persuade an indifferent creature to do something. So in other words, you kind of have to do this. You're going to have to do something apparently in terms of a check, charisma check, as we already discussed, to actually get them to do anything. It doesn't matter whether it's a risk or not. Not a problem, Matt. I totally understand. Good night. I'll see you later. So we got that. What about the hostile? Because this is the one that we really want to shift, right? We really want to see, can we use what's in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in terms of parlaying with monsters with a hostile creature? A hostile creature opposes the characters and their goals, but doesn't necessarily attack them on sight. Okay, good to know. For those dungeon masters that are having your monsters attack on sight, bear notice. Apparently it's in a book. For example, what's this? A consens. Oh, I don't know. I'm too tired. I can't even read that. I'm looking down here and looking to see what we can do. So it's talking about charisma checks. This is where I think our problem it starts to unwind. The adventurers need to succeed on one or more challenging charisma checks to convince a hostile creature to do anything on their behalf. Okay. That said, a hostile creature might be so ill-disposed towards the party that no charisma check can improve their attitude. So it doesn't mean just doing a charisma check is going to solve the problem. In which case, any attempt to sway it through diplomacy fails automatically. Now, have you noticed that there's no mention of intimidation or deception, only persuasion? So that's an interesting idea, in that maybe that charisma check really is not necessarily a charisma check, but there is a little proviso, because as we keep reading through, there's something else here. Changing attitudes. So apparently you can change the attitude of a creature. It's possible, depending on what the characters do, to change an indifferent creature's attitude. A hostile creature's attitude, probably more difficult. Determining characteristics. So I'm not going to read that section. What I want to do is I want to get to this conversation reactions table. This is the thing you want to look at, because for those of you who are looking for some meat and potatoes and Tashas, I think this is what you were truly looking for. And you'll probably already have it if you have the Dungeon Master's Guide. Oh, it does have a section talking about the charisma check and deception, intimidation, and persuasion. Okay, all right. So there's some openness for that. Back to the conversation reaction table. This is on page 245. 245. So for a friendly creature, there are some DCs. Always good to have some DCs to work with, right? So a 0 DC for a friendly creature. So in other words, you don't have to really get very high at all. The creature does as asked without taking a risk or risks or making a sacrifice. Okay, so you can get them to do stuff as long as it's not risky or they have to sacrifice anything. A DC 10, now I would like to point out that DC 0 is like more than very easy. It's almost like pointless to actually even do anything. DC 10 is easy. So why are we rolling for that? They've given us a scale anyway. This is what it says. The creature accepts a minor risk or sacrifice to do as asked. That's a DC 10 for a friendly creature in terms of your charisma check. Now the 20, now this thing doesn't go up to 30, it only goes up to 20. 20. The creature accepts a significant risk or sacrifice to do as asked. All right. So that, I've never used these tables. One, because it felt too mechanical for me. And I really wanted my players to actually talk to me and talk to my monsters and talk to the NPCs rather than have them just roll dice. But I guess this is supposed to be in conjunction with the narrative as well. Craze. What do you got here? I don't like these sorts of tables. They can be guidance and inspiration, but I think it's better to just see things based on the encounter and the players. Yep, I'm inclined to believe that. I agree. And Kevin from D&D Homebrew, who has a YouTube channel, agrees too. And you should go and check out Kevin's stuff. It's pretty good sometimes. You'll find some really good stuff there. I don't like the DC 0. Yeah, I've never been fond of a DC 0. 0 is like, what's the point in doing that? I don't even like DC 5 and 10 because why are we doing stuff that's very easy and just easy? And a lot of DCs are actually set to be easy. Like playing a game and you've actually set the difficulty for doing something as easy, like a DC 10. What was the point? What was the point? Honestly. There's a chance a friendly creature isn't in the mood to help. Yeah, I think if you do something that off-puts them, it's possible that's not going to work. you know. So let's have a look at the indifferent creature reactions, since we're wanting to talk about parlaying with monsters and we didn't really get everything we wanted in Tasha's. DC 0, oh there it is again. For an indifferent creature, their reaction, the creature offers no help but does not harm. Okay, so they don't attack you but they won't help you. Okay, so you don't have to do anything at all. DC 10, the creature does as asked as long as no risk or sacrifices are involved. I can see there being problems there because I feel like it really does depend on what the player's characters are asking them to do, even for an indifferent creature. And the DC 20, which is the one we're really interested in. The creature accepts a minor risk or sacrifice to do as asked. Okay. Alright, so we've got that. Let's go down to the hostile, because the hostile is where the nuts and bolts of parlaying with monsters really happens. Usually the friendly monsters and the indifferent monsters, as dungeon masters, we don't really need to worry too much about them. It's all good, okay? Nothing really happens. There usually isn't a fight, not unless somebody's being a dick. Oh! Okay. Hostile creature reactions, DC 0. The creature opposes the adventurer's actions and might take risks to do so. So in other words, they're probably going to attack you. Alright, well that should be pretty obvious. We shouldn't even have to roll for that one. Okay. Next, DC 10. The creature offers no help but does no harm. So in other words, if you're dealing with a hostile creature, your charisma check is a DC 10 and it's easy. And as long as you don't offend them, they don't offer you any help, but they don't attack you. A hostile creature. Really? Is that how we're looking at it? Oh, I don't like this bit. I don't know about you, I don't like this bit. Okay, let's look at the DC 20. The creature does as asked as long as no risks or sacrifices are involved. That's better. I feel like that's better because DC 20 is hard. DC 15 is medium difficulty. I do not like this table. I feel like this is why nobody uses it. And yet they have referred us to challenge rating and this section in the book, which most of us don't really want to use. I could be wrong. Maybe the people in the chat right now are not representative of generally dungeon masters running games. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it'll come down to somebody saying, but Fred, but I use it. And then I will do a survey on my channel to ask people if they use the social interaction rules in their games on page 244 through to 246. And I bet that most people don't touch it. In fact, they wouldn't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. That would be my suspicion. Okay, I think we have covered everything we can in terms of Tasha's. I think I will definitely cover more of the material in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in terms of the Dungeon Master. I think that's definitely going to happen. And I'm probably going to keep doing stuff for the players and the subclasses and for the Dungeon Master. Don't want to hang around and see what things could be exploited. Now, what does that mean for the future? Because I promised you guys a monthly video on Dragon of Ice by a Peak, okay? Which means that isn't going to happen because I'm doing this. But I feel like if you're running Dragon of Ice by a Peak, this is kind of information you would probably need to have at your disposal to give an idea of what's going on, okay? I have already pre-planned a video that talks about how to deal with the problem of the NPCs in Dragon of Ice by a Peak. But I'm not going to release it until Bob releases his video. When Bob releases his video, then I will do my live stream on that topic, okay? In terms of the Curse of Strahd, I think a lot of this is probably going to be stuff people could potentially use or not use in terms of the Curse of Strahd. So we will come back to that. I don't feel like there's so much information in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that it's going to take me that long to get through it. Frankly, I think it'll all be done and dusted in a couple of months, and then we'll be back to what we were doing before, which is tutorial with dice, miniatures and maps, Dragon of Ice by Peak, some sort of video that I've done with Wally DM, which is probably pre-recorded. That sort of stuff will come back. Curse of Strahd DM guides, Dragon of Ice by Peak guides will come back. But I think we're going to cover these things since this is, and I know I keep saying it, this book, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, is going to change things in your game. Even if you try to restrict them. Honestly, nothing is going to be the same after this. Yep, it is definitely Dungeons & Dragons 5.5. Okay, so we have covered everything. I think that we are well and truly in the know about how to deal with these sorts of things. All right, so wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.